sit or stand?
So wherever you want to sit.
I think I met you before.
There's these spots.
Yeah, some architect designed.
He's just here for questions.
Oh,
That's perfect, thank you. And roll call was taken, we'll call the meeting to order. Roll call was taken upon arrival. I want to start by thanking everybody for coming, particularly our two community members for this committee. The first agenda item is consideration of election of officers for the chair and vice chair of the committee. Is there any suggestions or thoughts on that?
You also need a secretary and treasurer.
Secretary, thank you, and treasurer. So we have those four positions. So maybe we can have some discussion on that.
I would nominate the city manager to chair for the first year. I'd make that motion.
Second.
Can we do all at once, Richard, or do we need to do each one individually?
I just do each one individually.
Is there any discussion on that? No? All those in favor?
aye.
And vice chair. So I was wondering if either, Mary or James, either of you would be interested in the vice chair.
Oh, I'll serve as vice chair.
Perfect, so I'll put that in
As long as it's
motion.
not too much work.
Okay.
Take that out of
Is
this.
there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Carried. Next we have the treasurer, and I'm thinking the natural fit would be Ashley. Just kidding. Would you be all right with that? Of course. Is everybody all right with nominating Kim?
Yes.
And is there a seconder?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And carried. Next, we have the secretary. Is there anybody that would, what is that position entail?
Technically, they are responsible for the minutes, but presumably we would have Paula or Annette to be actually take the minutes, and then they can just be presented by the secretary at the next meeting.
Yeah, so Annette, I talked to Annette, she'll be coming, she's just ill today, so she'll be coming all of our other meetings to actually do the minutes, so like Richard said, this person would just present at our next meeting for the acceptance of the minutes, so.
So it's not as hard as normally being secretary of a group.
Sure.
Are you okay
You're
with
looking
that?
at me, I mean, I guess.
Sure, that would be
I
lovely.
think I didn't have much choice there.
There's only so many around this table.
Does anybody want to put a motion for that?
I'd make that motion, or second.
Perfect, all those in favor?
Aye.
Carried. Next, we have the discussion regarding bylaws and other operating procedures. So I thought I'd ask Richard to go over everything with the committee, if everybody's all right with that.
Please,
So the only things that we don't have to technically do bylaws, but my suggestion is you all do just general bylaws similar to what a standard nonprofit would do, though it's not a separate nonprofit per se, but we could do similar type bylaws to that. The one thing that we do have to cover in those rules is we have to do a rule regarding duties of officers, attendance and participation of members at regular and special meetings, the procedure to remove a member by a majority vote of the other members for failure to comply with the rule, and other matters necessary to govern the conduct. So you can, I mean, I think the duties of the officers, you can use general, what you would normally have a president or vice president do, plus normally a secretary and treasurer. So normally the president would preside over the meetings, sign on behalf of the agency. The vice chair would be the alternative person to do those things in the event the chair wasn't there or the chair had stepped down. Secretary obviously manages the minutes, treasurer will manage the funds. So just a general, my thought was just a general descriptions for what you would have for a nonprofit entity.
So a question, I
Yes.
think there's several already set up across the state, aren't there?
Yes.
Huntington has one, right? And several, is there a way that we can borrow and look at the structure that they've set up? and
We
see?
could, I was gonna look at Huntington's, theirs is very good, and see if I can get a copy of their bylaws to the extent, and yes, generally take those and modify them as necessary.
Seems like that makes sense. I know, is Fairmont considering it the same thing?
I don't-
I know Wheeling, probably, anyway,
I
there's
don't know if
several.
Fairmont has done one, I know Huntington is the one who's been most active
Yeah,
with theirs. so
Charleston just recently set theirs up,
Yes.
so maybe we could look at theirs and
That's-
just,
That's not a problem, and my thought is they, especially to start out with, they're very generic, similar to any other small nonprofit type situation.
right.
So, yeah, we can absolutely do that and have those, and my thought would be send out drafts before the next meeting, and go over that with anybody. When we send out drafts, if you have any comments, you need to send them directly back to me or whichever staff member sent them, and don't send them to the group, because otherwise it creates a Open Governmental Meetings Act issue. So that's one thing about email. When we have a group email, the only thing we can discuss in that email is just logistical matters, i.e. who's available on, Tuesday, February 27th, if we were trying to schedule a meeting. You could say yes to that, but we shouldn't discuss in detail what we're planning on doing, if that makes sense. And we can provide you some additional information about that as well. But it's pretty straightforward. If you don't respond to an email, then there's no governmental meeting, so you're okay.
Lots of times I'll put that on the top of the email when I send it out to council. This is for information purposes. If you have any questions, call me. Don't respond to the email, just so we don't have any gray area there. So we'll make sure that we do that. If everyone's all right with that, we'll ask Richard to draft those and send those out too.
Yeah, the other thing, the attendance participation, you oftentimes see that you have to attend 70% of the meetings, and I think that seems like a pretty standard term. We can do that higher or lower if you all want, but usually you see these bylaws, the person we remove if they don't attend X percentage of meetings, and it seems like 70% jumps out, 75. It's usually not as low as like 50 or something, but usually jumps up to 70 or 75%.
Right. I think we should probably do that. I suspect we only have 2 citizen members, but you're all compelled to come from your role. Another question, Richard, about electronic voting and Zoom participation. Are you gonna?
Unfortunately, I believe that I need to double check and see if they changed it. I don't believe they did. They haven't updated the code since 2014, and in here, I believe it says that the person has to be in person for a quorum. Now, if it's a straightforward one, I don't think there's anything that stops a member from calling in, but they're not going to count towards a quorum and they couldn't vote.
And when you speak to the code, you're saying the code that
The what?
would enable the land use agency?
Yes, it's West Virginia Code 31, Chapter 31, Section 18.
Hey, can we get a copy of that?
Yeah, I can give you, I can email it to you, or I've got a copy here. I can give one of you, or we can run extra copies if you want.
Email's good. for me.
Sounds fine to me. Because I did have that thought too, is like, why couldn't we do this? My guess is because, again, they haven't updated this since 2014, which was a whole different time period.
Whole 10 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, we all know that one of the things that changed a couple of years ago is now it's much more common to be able to do Teams or Zoom. But I think that's the issue. A majority of the meetings, the board shall meet. A majority of the board, excluding vacancies, is a quorum. Physical presence is required under this paragraph. So to get a quorum, we're gonna have to be here physically.
I got you.
Obviously, I think you can call in and participate in the discussion, but I don't think you can vote or be part of a quorum. So that's something to keep in mind in the future. One other thing is we discuss how often we want to have regular meetings. I was going to suggest you do it maybe to begin with quarterly, or you could do it monthly, because you can call a special meeting whenever you want.
What is everyone's thoughts on that?
Just starting out quarterly would be fine with me.
Yeah, if we need to call a meeting, I suppose we could.
Yeah.
I don't want to put a burden on the community members.
Well, I think,
I almost think starting out it should be more frequently, just so we
Monthly?
can get our,
Everything rolling?
or every 2 months. I mean, I
Yeah,
think
something like
sometimes just it gives a little, sometimes monthly comes up very quickly.
Right.
But I think you know, I think, at least my interest in serving is that it's an active agency and not too passive, and sometimes quarterly you forget from one meeting to the next, and so my sense would be.
We can do monthly, and if we don't need a meeting, we can just cancel that month.
Well, I mean, we could always start that way and then
That's fine.
Adjust
make
as needed.
changes, I suppose, right?
I agree. I think monthly starting out is good.
That makes it, my thought was, just why I suggested quarterly is, I think we will be meeting more, but we can always schedule a special, but let's just go ahead and, the monthly's fine. So, that's really about the main things that we would, I think, have to cover today for what we want put in the bylaws. Otherwise, we'll just have a general one we'll send around, we can discuss at the next meeting, mark up how we want.
With the bylaws, does everybody want us to send out as an attachment the other jurisdictions, their bylaws as well, so you guys can see them?
Yeah.
There's Charleston, Huntington, maybe Wheeling, so we can attach those to the email just for reference.
Unless they're published on their, if they have a website or something like that, we could just do a link if that's okay. And
Sure.
I would like to look at theirs because they've spent the time to put them together.
Yeah. So we will do that as well. And we'll have those ready for we'll send them out beforehand, probably a week before, and then we'll have the meeting, we'll schedule it about a month from now. And we will have to schedule about a month from now to discuss, there's the upcoming auction, I believe, as well,
Yes, but I don't think they've scheduled the tax sale auction.
tax sale auction, so I wanted to discuss that next meeting before it actually happens, from what I've been told, and it could be bumped. It's supposed to
Mhm.
happen near the end of March.
This is the sale of property on the courthouse for tax? Okay.
Yeah, as a land bank, we'll have basically right of first refusal to a number of those properties. It's gonna be less than $50,000, or we have to have a demo lien or other type of lien against it. There's a couple other reasons, but there are a number of properties that we would have a first, basically be able to pay the taxes owed on it and receive the property. The only condition on that is if we receive the property, we have to go back, I look at the code again and double check, but I believe afterwards we'll offer it to the adjoining landowners to purchase, because they also have a similar type right of first refusal.
They do.
They do, they already had it under the code. Ours looks to trump that initially, but then we would have to, I think before we offer it for sale, I think this was the rule, we would have to offer it to them for our costs that we have in it, so. But, that shouldn't discourage us from buying anything, because it still ends up getting it into our hands, or at least the neighbor's hands, which is also a benefit,
Sure.
generally speaking.
So I kind of run into number 4 there, my
That's
apologies.
okay.
Also, we allotted some money in the budget through the revision for this committee,
Good.
so that we do have some funds available for property purchases. I'm on the same page as you, Mary. If it's gonna be a committee we're running, it needs to be active and actually doing things in the community, and I think the biggest part of that was actually funding the LRA. So that's already started,
Great.
and we'll get all that information compiled for the next meeting,
Okay.
the amount and all of that information.
That's great. That's very encouraging. Thank you.
You're welcome. Next, we have the discussion regarding future plans, projects of the agency. I think we kind of discussed that. We have a whole list of properties too that we met a couple months ago as staff. Our staff is going through and making recommendations on what we would like to acquire, and looking at we're reviewing our code right now in regards to tiny homes is one in particular that we're looking at. So staff's already been working towards that, so that will be coming forward to the committee as well to look at as well. If anyone has any ideas of other things we should be doing in this committee, we would all love to hear them as well.
So, just as some background, the city already owns a number of properties it's purchased over the years at tax sale or received in lieu of demolition liens. And many of those properties to the city itself have no real value. They are properties that Public Works would like to get rid of because they have to cut the grass every year.
Sure.
Some of those properties are too small to build a traditional home on, which is why we're looking at tiny homes. So one of the things to kick around your head is what to do with those properties. We could offer them to the adjoining landowners to buy. We could somehow market them for tiny home properties. Some of the larger properties make sense, where we've been able to put together several of them we could sell for a traditional home, that sort of situation. So it's something to kick around in our heads, how we want to handle that. But one of the things in the upcoming weeks is, I think, again, like Tiffany said, staff is going to go ahead and finalize what properties we want to move into the Land Reuse Agency, and the council will have to vote on that. We'll move those over there, because once we move them to the Land Reuse Agency, this board will have control of it and won't have to sell it by public auction. Could sell it by public auction, but don't have to. We can do deeds of trust and promissory notes. We have a lot more room on how we market those things than the council does. So it makes sense to have these smaller properties that have limited value, have basically no value to the city, from a, logistics or capital plan, to go ahead and get those over here and then start figuring out how to market them in this board.
So Richard, when they are transferred to this agency, how does the relationship on maintenance and insurance liability, any of that, is that something we need to consider as far as
I believe that maintenance we would still be able to do that through Public Works.
through an MOA or something? I mean,
Yeah,
should
but-
we do some sort of?
We'll be able to have some unofficial group agreement, and they should still be able we can still cover them under the city's main insurance policy, because this is a city board, so our insurance policy generally covers as boards, but we'll double check on that.
Okay, great, yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of creative uses that, at least I've heard, maybe you've heard some too, James, as far as how these, like assembling them for community parking, for example, where you
Yes.
have bad on-street parking situations and, or, designated handicap, or, depending upon the location. So it seems like there's a lot of, I don't mean a lot, but some
Right.
options that could really enhance the quality of life in the neighborhoods, at least where we have some congestion issues or parking issues, or or passive parks. I know we don't need more parks to maintain, but passive green space, which may or may not be useful for us. Whether that creates a new problem or not is something we want to think about probably.
And I think that's what we're looking for from you two especially, is ideas on how to use these properties and better everything.
And I think one thing on the tiny houses, excuse me, and Tom, you might know, I think the state code requires in West Virginia, I think it's 600 square feet.
Yes.
Some areas of the country have about half that
Right.
for a requirement. So I don't know if the city has a way to circumvent this or adopt a smaller
So when they say
standard
600, is that
square feet.
main floor, or is that
I
if
think
it
it's total.
total?
It's my
So
understanding.
we're sort of looking at 500 square feet on the main floor as our standard.
Okay.
We want to be progressive and allow those type of things, but also preserve the character of the city. So we're taking that into consideration when we're talking about these tiny homes.
Yeah, because there's a few lots that I've thought about that would be nice for tiny homes that are already existing
Yeah.
within the city.
And putting some parameters there, like it's only one tiny home per lot.
Yeah.
You can only have so many in a row. Like there's a lot of thought. If you don't put any parameters around it, that
Oh, yeah,
it's
they're pretty much
problematic.
out.
Yes,
Yeah.
and you want to promote off-street parking too, to the degree that a lot will accommodate. It
Right.
depends, especially rear entry, which you can have off-street parking.
Sure.
And I believe in Mr. Carr's proposed ordinance is going to require one off-street spot. So that's part of the goal, and that's part of the issue now, is that a lot of these houses require to have, if you were to build a new house to pass code without a variance, you're supposed to have an off-street parking, but yet many of these lots can't do it, and they also can't do the minimum square footage, so that's why we want to look at that.
This adjacent property owner option, I think, is also something to really study, like what is working in some other places. 'Cause
Right.
sometimes that doesn't work, it creates more of a code problem in the future. But I think that's something to think about too. It enhances. I know there was a project down in Fairmont, this was years ago, that they did, it was an urban renewal project, but in the Bellevue area, that looked at sort of a whole, probably 300 lots in general in the whole neighborhood, and identified which of those, I mean, it was much more strategic as opposed to just sort of picking them out. And so they did some lot assembly there. They did adjacent property owner. They also looked at which were rental and which were owner occupied, and kind of looked at the right balance for that. So, you know, sometimes there's a little bit down the road view that we could take maybe to enhance some of the quality of the development, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And I believe that the adjacent landowners, basically right of first refusal, only applies to those properties bought at tax sale.
Okay.
So the properties will be moving into, that the city already owns, those wouldn't be subject to it. We could do that, but we don't have to.
Right.
We'll also probably end up with, there's gonna be, the city will have a demo program this year. Hopefully some of those demo properties, in lieu of charging the demolition costs, will be quick claimed over to the city. Those would be other properties that would end up, hopefully, in the Land Reuse Agency, and those would not be subject to the adjacent. So it's just what we buy at tax sale is
And
generally how I read it.
sometimes those adjacent lots, part of the issue is that they remain two separate titles. So people hold on to them in the hopes that they can eventually sell it. If you merge it into one larger lot, a lot of times that alleviates that issue that comes up. So that's a good potential solution to that.
Yeah, that's good thinking. Yes,
Yeah,
that's
one of the nice things about how they wrote the code is it's not a one-size-fits-all. We have a lot of different avenues to go. And, you know, we're able to finance things, we're able to put restrictions on those covenants, and stuff that we wouldn't be able to do, the council couldn't do through just public auction, where it's just whoever buys it. And here we can be a bit more constructive.
Yeah, I'm excited about that part
Yeah.
too. I mean, I was involved with, as the foundation, where I used to work, we were involved in helping to develop the design for this, and so with the brownfield centers and others, and so I think that's exciting that we have this kind of option to be more flexible. A good question about the, I hope it's not out of order, we're in general discussion. The funding from the state that Ashley, we were talking about, that's available through DEP, needs to be the applicant for that, or what do we
For
first?
demoing,
Yeah, for the demo.
the city, and we've actually been approved for the funding.
Good, okay.
So we're looking at taking down a number of structures this year. We're just,
Great.
there's a bunch of paperwork we have to submit. They sent us a list. We're working on that. I believe it's around, is it around 18 structures we're looking to take down?
14 right now.
14.
With other possible candidates.
Yeah.
We may have some voluntary demo agreements
Oh,
Yeah.
good. great.
coming in. We haven't got them back yet, but it's very possible we will.
So that we're going to be moving forward on that this year as well. So that's a good, progress is a good thing.
Yeah, that's a great thing.
Yeah.
One of our main goals this year, I think, is Mr. Carr sent me the list of what was recently placarded, so I'm going down through slowly to check to see what has liens against it or stuff that could be outstanding that we could go, look, it's gonna be $8,000 to $15,000 to tear down this property. Are you planning on paying that, or do we wanna do it and let the city make a decision that we won't assert that in exchange for the property? One of the issues is in the past, if you put the lien on there, then it's just, that's it. So we want to be more proactive this year of making sure that we're either trying to collect the money or get the property in lieu of. And it still probably works out better for them because these properties really aren't worth that much, even once they're clear. The one I looked at the other day, I think, honestly, a few $1,000s for an empty lot there, which would be considerably less than what the demo is gonna cost. And a lot of it depends on, the city can do demos in one of two ways. They can do it in-house, and they can do it through contractor, and that depends on if there's asbestos remediation or not. So if there's no asbestos and we do it in-house, it becomes a much more cost-effective and much easier to make that type of arrangement.
Do we have, I'm sorry if I'm asking too many questions.
That's okay.
Do we have a full inventory of what is considered, what's the proper title, vacant, dilapidated, or what do we
There would be-
label those?
well,
Uninhabitable, or?
We have different classifications. We have vacant property registration, we have properties on the condemned list, and properties on the demolition list are the three main, is that the three main lists you would say, Tom?
Yes, that's the three main lists that we have. And so, and we stand up, you can't see Tiffany too, so you stand up. But the three main lists we have are exactly what was described. And there's a misconception, I guess, that I want to put to rest too with the board before, or the agency before they get started, is that even though on condemnation, when you condemn a house, you condemn it for a number of reasons. It can be because of no water, sewer, utilities, just as simple as that. The structure can be fine, but if it doesn't have utilities to it, we can condemn the house and do, so that no people live in it until they have proper utilities. And then once they've been on that list for 2 years, you can look at it for demolition, but it does not mean that it's is okay to demo the house after 2 years. It has to be structurally deficient prior to being able to demo the house. And so that's a misconception that we get sometimes, is that, well, once it's been on there for 2 years, you can demo it, but you can't. It has to be structurally deficient prior to demo. So anyway, another thing or two, if I can, that we need to probably think about as we're moving forward is that it's nice for I'm not particularly, I'd like to see the city get the properties, but I don't either, because from Public Works standpoint, it's just an extra work that they have for understaffed already. And so that's not really a good use. So it's really good if we can get people to, and the neighbors to purchase those properties. That's the best use for us to be able to do, because one, that helps to increase our space for MS4 regulations, our green space, and two, it then takes that off of the city to maintain.
Yeah.
But the other side of that coin is too, if we go, and I've pondered this a bit, I guess, is that if we go with the tiny houses, then that becomes income to the city because the taxes go up on those properties. And so that is a good use too. But I think this agency has the right, and I've investigated, and Mr. Carr, Ashley has got a document that would be good for the whole agency to have with regard to things that all the College of Law has put together, and it discusses the different avenues the city has to work. And Ashley, you might make that available to the whole board or the whole agency if you haven't. It was a good read.
Yeah.
And thinking about it. So
We can add that to the pack.
But you have this opportunity, I think, from reading the potential to go and to distribute some of that green space out, particularly if it doesn't make sense to, in the area like you were talking about, this area that we're looking at, makes sense to do small homes, then that becomes extra income for the city. Where it may make sense to look at a whole block and say, let's try to, and this agency has a long-term role too, is to look at this block. I mean, like, I think we have looked at this over around College Avenue and area particularly, is that there's a lot of older homes in that area that if we could get the whole block and put in, and maybe even rezone it if needed, or work at rezoning to put in multifamily houses or something in that area. But I think we've probably demoed, I'd say at least 7 homes in that area, and there's others that are in semi-dilapidated conditions, but the owners are living in them. And we don't have a lot of say with regard to owner houses. But anyway, it's just some things to think about, and particularly, we're looking at MS4 regulations and things, and the more green space we have, that helps with your MS4 designations too, and our ability to work with the DEP on that.
Thank you.
Question in order. Just your opinion on, what's the experience been with the neighboring property owners taking over? Has it improved? I mean, in general, do we have any, I know it's a lot of it's windshield survey type of thing, but do we have much success with that? Has that's been
I don't think we've really pushed that a lot at this point. And I think that, again, this is one of the things this agency can do, is to really maybe contact the owners, maybe talk to them about possibly taking over or buying the properties at a nominal value even. And one of the other things that I've been involved with because of other things is this program that the state has now for demos, and have asked the questions, okay, what happens with the state gives you money, then what happens to those properties after, because most of the time the property owners don't have the money to be able to demolish the houses, what happens then? And it really, the answers I've gotten is from John King is that that's up to the city. And this is where this agency, I think, can have a great deal of effect, is making, because if you get the money to demolish the house, then it becomes usually, and we've done this a lot, we'll put a lien on it. And at some point it becomes the city's because they can't afford to pay the lien, and we can go after the property and whatnot, or else make that agreement. Or we have made the agreement since I've been here several times with the property owners to take the property in lieu of payment, particularly if the property is relatively, because a lot of times your demolition costs are $20,000 and the property's worth $3,000. So it's not really good for the city, but if we get those properties through the and this is maybe a bad thing to say, but the federal government paying for the property, which is essentially the DEP's getting the money through the federal government primarily, is that helps our program where we can hopefully establish policies that will benefit the city by taking those properties and then having a opportunity to put together something or to sell for a lesser cost, but however it benefits the city. So that's just something that I've been pondering, I guess.
Since Tom brought up policies, one thing I noticed looking at what Charleston's LRA does, they have a property acquisition policy that goes along with their bylaws, and they have a property inspection policy that also goes along with that. And then they've got a stakeholder policy or stakeholder input policy that also goes along with that. Because we got to do this consistent with our comprehensive plan, our public input from our stakeholders and developers.
Right.
We probably need to have some roundtables, meetings with these people. And of course, just defining an outline of what we can and we can't do, and understanding each other's roles. And just like the sidewalk program, I think that would probably fall under the URA instead of LRA. But just understanding each other's roles and coming up with these policies, I think everything will run a little smoother. But I want to submit all these for everybody to review.
That's great.
So I'll put that, give those to Tiffany.
And I think Tom had a good point, is to look at, we gotta start, if Clarksburg's gonna rejuvenate itself, I think we really need to start looking at an entire block, and not just a house here and a house there, like a bunch of missing teeth, because
Clusters.
sometimes it's a flip of the coin, which house do you demolish? I mean, you could almost tear down all three, but we're trying to pick the worst one. And nobody wants to come in here and build a house in the middle of two houses that were just as bad, or almost as bad as the one you just tore down. And I think, I appreciate the green space, but I feel that we need to start building some houses in Clarksburg to get people moving into Clarksburg, which will help rejuvenate the downtown and revitalization. Also, it's going to get younger people that be attracted to maybe some smaller homes, because that's pretty much all inflation and everything. It's about all you can afford right now. And some older folks that just want to downsize.
Absolutely.
So I think there's some viability in the tiny houses. I also think rezoning is very important to look at. You know, we have residential neighborhoods right now. There's some are dilapidated, but they're along Route 50. Were residential before Route 50 was built, but now that's prime commercial real estate. But it's still, well, the mindset is, well, it's residential, so we can't touch it. So I think it needs the whole town, I think, really needs to be looked at as far as the zoning.
I think you're right, that
There's-
working with the URA and this agency, you kind of look at a future plan and
It needs to be a
strategy.
master plan.
Yeah, more of a
It needs to be
master plan.
and a strategic plan.
Yeah.
They're similar, but there are some differences.
Yeah, the URA is very focused down on downtown
Sure.
specifically,
Yeah.
and this is the entire city, so there are some differences, but I think there are some overlap as well.
Yeah.
You know, I've reviewed a lot of the state building codes, and of course, I'm real familiar with our planning and zoning codes. The size of the lot's pretty much gonna determine how much or what the size of the structure's gonna be. Because we still have to follow our zoning district, zoning rules and regulations, so, we may make a few exceptions to some of those to allow for some exceptions, but you have to adopt them and they have to apply to the whole district, not just certain pieces of property, so those still play into it, but I think I'm off to a pretty good start with, at least the fundamentals to get an ordinance together, and we're gonna work with Richard with that. And probably, James, if he'd like to, Tom, anybody else that wants to look at it and have some input in it, but I think it could work and be a benefit to the city.
Is there anything else from the committee? Otherwise, we can schedule, is the committee all right meeting during the workday, or do evenings work better?
Workday's fine.
Days fine. And is there a specific, days of the week that work better for the two community members in particular?
What's today? Thursday? Is
You're
this-
retired.
I'm retired, semi-retired.
I want to be retired, I'm just not there yet.
Actually, Tuesdays or Wednesdays are
Tuesdays or
better,
Wednesdays? Okay.
Actually.
Actually, Tuesdays would be better for me.
Tuesdays?
We have a
Tuesdays?
meeting every Wednesday for
Perfect.
the next 2 years.
Okay.
We're all here anyway, so.
Yeah, so we'll try to.
I have a Monday with the Cultural Foundation.
So we'll try to schedule the next one on a Tuesday. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So maybe.
All those in favor?
Right.
There we go. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the city for forming this agency.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the opportunity to serve too, by the way, because this is something, vacant and dilapidated is near and dear to my heart for some weird reason.
Well,
I just feel like it really helps.
I'm
the
glad
city.
it's finally being addressed
I got-
more aggressively.
I got Huntington's ordinance too. Got a little vehicle in their building and stuff. They use the word enforcement agency now. They put Clarksburg Land Reuse Agency. I'll get that to you
Thank
too.
you. That's awesome.
One other question to Mike, maybe, the Housing Authority has a community development corporation, right? They call it Mountain something, or?
Yes, I believe they do.
Which is how they develop some of those.
Right.
Over in Addison area. I didn't know, I was real good friends with Lou,
Mhm.
past rector of the Housing Authority, but I was wondering, is that agency still pretty active in doing
I
development?
think if it's the one, same one, talking about the same one, I think they are, and they're still doing projects. And I thought I'd reach out to them at some point, because, some of these things may be something they want to take on.
I mean, they have the, back to the funding.
Right.
Those folks can, Community Development Corporation can develop like you said, a cluster of a strategy and all the kinds of things that we're talking about that could be very complementary if their ambitions are in that direction.
Absolutely.
Which makes a lot of sense. I mean, they don't all have to be affordable housing. In the CDC, it just about quality of life and
Mhm.
housing.
It doesn't make any sense to keep on the tax rolls and keep cutting the grass for no reason. I think that's gotta be our main goal. My guess is we're gonna have a combination of all 3 or 4 different ways to do it.
Fortunately, we're picking this up at a time where there's a few places that have had some experience already. So
Yep.
it's back to your point, actually, about voluntary, I know, can't recall exactly the group, but the bad buildings groups know about it, but they did a lot of work on voluntary
Yeah.
requests. People don't want, I mean, a lot of them, they're living 5 states away, family inheritance, they don't want this, but they don't really know what to do
Exactly.
about it, so this it offers options for them as
A
well.
lot of communities, when they hear the word development, they think of low-income housing, and we don't want that beside us.
Yeah, we don't need that, well,
That's a big fear to a lot of communities.
sure is, right? I think it needs to be compatible,
Well, you need a good strategy for a well-blended use of land use and property regulations that benefits the community as a whole. You know, when you get that going, and we got a lot of great things in place. We just did a comprehensive plan. We got the WVU College Law, looking on the zoning maps, zoning ordinances. Everything's falling into place to get something done the right way.
very good. Well,
Good to meet all of you.
good to meet you too, yeah, thank you, Rick.
Thank you guys.